Alright, so in today's video we'll be talking about the process of reflashing the myCNC ET10 controller that you see in front of you here. And we'll be talking about the two main methods that you can reflash it with. First of all, the first method involves disassembly, so you'll be taking this board apart, while the second method involves these contacts right here. Here and here on the board that I'll show you in a bit more detail later. But first of all, here we have this board. We'll be going through method number one, which is disassembly. As you can see, it is still assembled, and I have unplugged the power cord from it, so there's no power being supplied to the board right now. So first thing we want to do is disassemble this board by unclipping this bottom section from the top. Before we do this, however, do note how the board is assembled here. Note how there's about a millimeter distance from the Ethernet port to the main board itself. This will come in useful once you're reassembling the board together. So we're going to unclip it like so, and on the other side as well. There we go. Note that we're keeping this little cord connected together. We're not unplugging that. And here we are. We have the two halves of the myCNC ET10 board right here. Alright, now that the disassembly part is done, what we'd like to do next is we'd like to reconnect the power supply to the board. So we have our 24 volt power back on. Let me move the camera a little bit so you can see it a little better. And here we will be plugging in our power supply. Alright, the board is now powered on, as you can see. Note how we're still leaving this small cord connected between the two boards. Alright, so next we will be plugging in a mini USB cord that looks like this to this port on the bottom of the ET10 board, like so, and we'll be plugging it into our PC on the other end. Next, we'd like to close two jumpers on the myCNC board, on this small board right here. These jumpers are going to be the G4, which is the reset right here, and the G5, which is the programming. So here and here. Alright, I'm going to take two of these. We will close G4. There we go. And G5. As you can see, the G5 has lit up. Now that we've closed them, we can remove the G4 jumper right here. And we're going to be opening the myCNC software on our computer and heading into our settings, support, and into the firmware update tab. We select our board, which is the ET10, myCNC ET10. Choose from your release, night build, and testing firmware version. And then for your port, use the dev TTY USB 0, which should appear on your screen here. For the rate, set 115200, and after you've selected all of this, press the Update Firmware button. The download will start, and you will see Sector 1, Sector 2, etc., 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 until we reach Sector 0, which is our final sector, and that signifies that the reflashing process was completed successfully. And at the end we'll get the firmware was updated successfully message right here. Once the firmware reflash process is completed, we can remove all of our jumpers. So remove your G5 jumper. You can remove the mini USB cord right here. And you can reassemble the myCNC ET10 board. Note that when reassembling the board, once again, you don't accidentally insert it incorrectly. So if you see a board being inserted like this, for example, where you see there's probably a couple millimeters of distance between the Ethernet ports and the board itself, you see this gap right here, that's too much. Or likewise, if you see that you're inserting it like this, where there's no gap at all, those are incorrect, and it should look like this instead, with about maybe a millimeter tops gap right here. So we reassemble the board, click it back together, and once we have done that, we can power it back on, and the board will now be reflashed. Alright, so the second method doesn't actually involve unplugging, or rather disassembling, reassembling the board, etc. But it will simply be done by accessing these contacts from the bottom here. So if you can see this board right here, here is where my Ethernet port is. So this is this section of the board right here. The G4 is this little section right here, so right here. While the G5, I have a button connected to it already to make it a little easier. All this button does is it shorts, it closes the contact, and allows you to activate this jumper. So G4 right here, G5 right here. Alright, so now we can set this board down, plug the board back in, alright, and now we simply turn it around. And what we have here is once again our G4 and G5 right here. So we'd like to first of all plug our mini USB, just as we did the last time around, right here. There we go. 1 second. There we go. And then we'd like to close this G4 jumper. I'm simply going to be using a wire. You can use any sort of a contact that you have handy, So I'm going to close this and I will be pressing this button right here. I'll be removing the G4 contact, and I'll continue holding the G5. So now we navigate over to our software, to our settings, support, and we have our firmware update once again. We have our UART port, and we can simply click to update the firmware. And once the firmware has updated, you can once again release your G5 jumper right here and simply restart the board. Thank you for watching.